Good morning and welcome to YBC Revolt Talk. I am Tanya Dunbar, founder of Young Black Consultants Group, also known as YBC. By day, I am a program director for a software company where I lead a team of 20 consultants managing a portfolio of 20 plus projects with a revenue budget of $15 million for a project management system in the construction industry. I am also a serial entrepreneur with several businesses in various industries from real estate to insurance. So who is YBC and what is YBC Revolt Talk? So let me tell you, we are a group of 10 highly educated young professionals who have organized together to create YBC Revolt Talk with the primary focus of educating our communities on the racial systemic issues that we face today. We will be bringing various topics of discussion with expert guests bi-weekly to discuss the issues facing our communities and hopefully impart on you valuable information that is targeted to helping us create generational wealth to counteract racial disparities. We invite you to please go follow, like, and share all of our multiple social media outlets on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube at YBC Revolt. This will allow you to stay up to date on our hosted talks as well as additional educational opportunities. We would like to take this time right now to thank each of you for joining us today as we launch our first Revolt Talk. With today's topic focused on a very uncomfortable conversation for most, but it is a necessary conversation as it is the center of the daily lives of the YBC members and many of our viewers today. So today's talk will be moderated by Rachel Kaufman. And without further ado, I present to you YBC Revolt Talk, Living Black in America, the Perspective of the Black Professional. You're on mute. You're mute, Rachel.
But it's not.
There it is.
There we go. Thank you, Tanya. And I'll be your moderator for today. So the saying goes, it takes a village. And here we want to build a community of people where we can share information, educate each other, and have fun in the process. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to submit those. We'll try our best to get to as many of them as we can before the session ends. All right, so I'm going to kick off this first segment. I take a cue from my favorite movie, Kindergarten Cop, and I like to call this one, Who Was Your Daddy and What Does He Do? Except in this case, it's a round of introductions. So I'll go first. My name is Rachel Kaufman. I'm a budding serial entrepreneur and a senior business analyst. I work in the technology space, implementing construction project management software. Now, who's next?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Timothy Snelling. I, too, am a senior business analyst in the technology space, and I'm specializing in construction management software.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Harold Booker. I'm a senior project manager in the IT space, originally from Beaumont, Texas. Now I'm based in the Baltimore, Maryland area.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sanders Jackson. I am also a business analyst implementing construction management software, and I have a nonprofit that promotes STEM in underrepresented communities.
Hello, my name is Rick Henry. I'm a software business analyst, entrepreneur, and I work in the software industry.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Chantel Kelly. I am a business software analyst in the technology space, specializing in construction management.
Hello, I'm Eunice Pierre-Lewis with over 15 years of accounting experience. I'm currently a corporate controller. My experience vast. It goes over through nonprofit. Currently, I'm in the technology industry, and I've worked in academia.
Hey, thank you, everyone, for taking that moment. Our goal with each episode is to allow you all to get to know us, and then hopefully we have a chance to get to know all of you. That's how community starts. So what many of you may be wondering is, what was the event that actually sparked us wanting to do this first talk, the topic, and basically getting everybody involved? So Tanya, you might remember this one. A couple weeks ago, we were on social media, scrolling through the gram, and I saw a woman post something asking for advice. She said she had 2 children. The youngest was 5 years old, and she wasn't sure if 5 was too young to start having the talk about how people of color in this country get treated differently. So she was asking people to share stories and also give advice to see what she should do. And then from there, Tanya and I started to just continue the conversation and share stories of our own. For myself, I can remember the first time having a talk with my family. It was actually when I was in 1st grade. And for the 80 babies out there, that was back in the day when the teachers could actually lock the classroom doors. We had prayer still in school, and every classroom actually had a landline telephone. So on this particular day, I wasn't feeling well. The teacher called my dad, asked if he could come up and pick me up from school. My dad said, sure. But when he actually got to the room to pick me up, the teacher locked the door and refused to let him into the room because she said that she didn't believe he was my dad. She said that he didn't look like me. And for those of you that aren't aware and never met my father, he has a lighter complexion than I do. Back in the day, the slang term for that would have been red bone. That was my dad. But it also was the first time that I realized that there was even something in the first place about there being a different skin color. That was something that I never realized and I never paid attention to. And it was significant because it wasn't just that moment. You know, you had a classroom full of other kids that were also watching the teacher, and they were building their cadence off of her. So you're talking weeks, days, and for some kids, even years after, having to go to school and hear stuff like your mom cheated on your dad, you're adopted, your dad's not really your dad and you didn't know it, and having that continue. So for us, and for what people should realize, it's not just one conversation. The conversation is actually, it's a continual basis. And in our household, that's what it was. That triggered the first conversation, but then it continued after that. And so with that being said, Chantel, I'm going to come to you first because the other day you actually started to share your story, but then you wanted to wait so that we can kind of talk about it as a group here. So I'm going to pose the first question to you. At what age do you remember being aware that there was a different treatment of people of color in this country?
Yes, thank you, Rachel. I definitely, mine was definitely in the classroom as well. And I think that's where it starts off for a lot of people, honestly. Mine, I think, was a little bit later on in life, as a lot of you all on the call know, but our viewers may not. I'm a 1st generation born American. Both of my parents are Jamaican and came in their late 20s and 30s. And so segregation, extreme racism wasn't something necessarily discussed in my household. Coming from an island that is 90% Black, they do experience discrimination, but racism is just a little bit different. It's classism, it's colorism, but there's not necessarily segregation. So it's not something that was really discussed in my household. It's not something that I think really hit home for them, where they felt like they had to say, hey, you know, back in the days, we couldn't do this. They didn't have the same experiences that a lot of my other Black friends had experienced, their parents had experienced growing up. So I do remember one year, this is crazy, it was 7th grade. I don't know why I went down like the rabbit hole. It was like Black History Month. And I think I watched like Mississippi Burning. I watched like every Black movie you could think of about slavery and just the injustices in America. And I was livid. I didn't know this happened. I couldn't believe I didn't know this happened. I couldn't believe my parents didn't speak to me about it. I just was beside myself. I remember being very angry and my mom having to talk to me saying, you know, she didn't really experience this. So I went to school and I was telling my friends, of course, and I had reading class. So for reading, we had to, it was Black History Month. So I was excited because I said, you know what, we're going to be learning. I had learned about Martin Luther King earlier, but I just, honestly, I didn't know about the extreme racism that existed in America. So it was Black History Month. I was excited because I said, we're going to learn all these things that I had been watching on television. And we had to read an essay on Serena Williams and Arthur Ashe, 2 athletes, and that was it. And that's all we did for Black History Month. And I was so excited to get to it. And prior to that, we had been reading on the Holocaust for about 3 months. So I raised my hand and I said, you know, why are we only doing this? Why are we only learning about Black athletes? Like, Black people do more than play sports. And I got into a big argument with my reading teacher. She said I was inappropriate. And I said, well, we spent so much time in the Holocaust. And she told me that nowhere near as Black people died as they did in the Holocaust. And I said, well, if slavery lasted 400 years, this only lasted a little bit of time. I was removed from the class. I got a referral. I was suspended. My mom then had to come to the school to get me out of internal suspension. The assistant principal got involved. My mom then contacted the Broward County School Board and the superintendent got involved. It was a really big thing in my school. We had like a conference, there was like a press conference involved, and I actually got the curriculum changed going forward, where we had to learn more than athletes. It couldn't just be 1 or 2 days. We had to learn about inventors, scientists, things like that. And they interviewed myself and other Black children in the school and asked us, you know, what we wanted to learn about, how we felt we were slighted and things like that. So I think that was the first time I experienced severe injustice, and I realized, like, whoa, this is something I'm going to be facing for the rest of my life.
Wow, that's really deep, Chantel, and it's interesting that you say that it started in the classroom, right? I think for a lot of us, that is where it starts at, to your point. And I can remember when I was like 7 or 8 years old, I was at after school care, aka daycare. You know, back then that's what we did. They didn't have after school care at the schools, but
Yeah.
at any rate, I'm outside and my friends and I are playing, and we get into this altercation with this little girl who was Caucasian. And she had referred to my 2 friends and I as nigger monkey bitches. Now, at that age, my mother had taught me that a nigga and being a bitch were not words you called anybody. And it's definitely not words that you wanted to be called. So, of course, that led to me and the little girl getting into a fight. Now, the teacher broke up the fight. At that point, you know, I felt like we were equally responsible in terms of what led up to the altercation and just the fight itself. But the teacher sent me inside immediately, and she let the little girl stay outside. They called my mother, and they attempted to tell her that they were going to kick me out of daycare. But if any of y'all know my mother, you know that wasn't like going over very well, because she's like, my child fighting must have been for a good reason. But anyways, my mother arrived. And I told her the whole story. And so she then found out that I had been sent inside while the little girl got to remain outside. And during this time while she's outside, she continued to throw racial epithets at my friends. But my mother had a few choice words with the director and, you know, demanded to understand, well, what was the punishment for the white girl who was equally, if not more, at fault. And now by the time my mom finished, I didn't get kicked out of daycare by any means. But, you know, it was in that moment that it brought that I think about. I was living Alyssa Cole's statement in An Unconditional Freedom, where she says, I was born a Negro in a country where it is a crime. And I was ignorant enough to not know that I had already been convicted.
Mm-hmm.
You know, thank you both for taking the time to share. And I was a little leery if I wanted to start off with that question, because I know it causes you to get a little vulnerable and maybe go back and relive and remember some things that might kind of hurt a little bit. You know, one of my favorite quotes from Maya Angelou, and I think that it still applies even today, is people don't always remember what you say or even what you do, but they always remember how you made them feel. And I think these stories are a perfect example of that. Even though for all of us, they happened so long ago, they were very relevant and prevalent in our life, even then all the way today. So one thing that I think everyone should take away is always just remember the fact that your words have impact. Even if it's minimal to you, what's minimal to you doesn't mean that it's minimal to someone else or in their life. I think in my own situation, I wish that I could say that things got better as I got older, but I think as a lot of us know, unfortunately, it didn't. It makes me recall my first job in the position of director. I was hired to run this rehab facility, and it wasn't until after I got hired, I realized that I was receiving pay that was significantly lower than everyone else, even people that had the same educational background that I had. The only difference between us was my color. And when I say significant pay, I mean a difference of $40,000 to $45,000 a year, significant pay. Now I decided to stay with the position because I figured it was a way that I was going to make connections, and that through that I would also learn other skills and capabilities to add to my resume, which I did. And those connections actually allowed me to land my first job in technology. So at that point, I kind of went tech and never went back. But what about you, Ciandris? What about your professional experience? So the next question will go to you. Name a time when you felt professionally slighted because of the color of your skin.
Sure thing. So my experience has to do with being hired, which is a place where a lot of people of color experience being slighted. So this was back in 2008 with the whole financial crisis, and my mom had been trying to get me to go into IT for years, and I just kind of fought it. So in 2008, I couldn't find a job, and she recommended that I work or apply to work at her company. So when I did that, I made it to the final round of interviews, but they indicated that they were going with another candidate because I didn't have the experience, which at that time was fair. So I took that time, went back, got my master's in information systems project management with a concentration in healthcare IT. And this was a healthcare IT company I was applying to. I also got an internship with McKesson, which was one of the larger healthcare IT companies at the time. So I literally just kind of made myself the perfect candidate for this position. So once I was done with my master's and internship, I applied again to the very same company. And their, I guess, excuse at that point was because my mom worked there, the whole nepotism thing, they weren't okay with having me work at the same company as my mom, which was interesting. There was definitely a husband and wife that worked there together. There was a grandfather whose son graduated from high school, and he brought him on immediately. So at that point, I kind of knew that the nepotism rule was in place, but only for apparently people of color. And it just goes to the whole notion that people of color oftentimes have to be 10 times better. I've heard of this same company hiring waitresses, not to say put this career down, but waitresses from Outback because they like their personality. Whereas I went and got a whole master's in internship, to prepare myself for that opportunity, and still wasn't able to get it. So again, we have to be a lot of times 10 times better and more prepared than people of other races.
What about you, Rick? Do you have any experiences with feeling that from a professional perspective, feeling slighted?
Yeah, so for me, similar to you, Rachel, as far as the hiring process, I got hired for a position. This was a software company, and I just came from a software company. So for a fact, I knew I had all the experience I needed and just be able to handle the responsibilities of the position. So I did go on an interview. My first interview was more of a phone interview, just to make sure I understand the responsibilities and everything. And then I was brought in for a in-person interview. And at that point, that in-person interview was more for a cultural fit. And I know I fit the culture, just my characteristic, my personality, everything about me. I just got the vibe that I worked well with everyone that I met with. So as far as everything like that, I walked out of that meeting, that interview, proud. I felt real good after that. So it took some time after that for me to get a call back. I kind of reached out to the company a couple times, and then I got contacted back. And with them, it was more so they were still on edge with me, and they wanted to bring me back in to meet for another interview. So I was brought back in for another interview. At this point, I met with the COO. At this point, this is a very high level person in the company that I'm meeting with, and I met with them, and we just sat down and talked, and got to know each other, asked some other questions. It was more of a second phase of the interview, and then eventually they offered me the position the night after. But everybody probably goes through that same experience as far as the interview process. But for me, when they offered me the position, it was a junior position. It was a position that wasn't the normal position. And at first, I thought it was just something. Well, it's probably an entry level start off position for everyone. And then as I went through and I seen others get hired after me, and I seen the ones that got hired before me, I noticed that there wasn't other juniors. I was the only one at that point. And it was just something that sat with me, and I was wondering, why was I given that position when I know my qualities, my experience, everything matched up with everything that they were looking for. And it was just a question that I've always had to just ask myself and wonder for the company itself. And it just made me have to work harder to get to the position where everyone started at. And then I had to, at that point, build myself up to exceed. So it's just something that hurts, but you just have to live with sometimes.
You know, I definitely can relate to that. I'm curious, with everyone on the call and all of our experience combined together, have any of you ever also experienced either Ciandris's side of the house, where she knows that she was more than qualified for the position, didn't get the position, and there were other people within the company that fell in line with whatever the company's excuse was for not hiring? Is there anybody else that experienced that? I know I have.
Oh, definitely. I think we see it all the time, right? When I'll say it this way. I often say that most Black people work with people who are probably less skilled and less qualified than them, because to Ciandris's point, we have to be twice as good. I feel like in most every company and organization that I've worked for, it has been the Black folks who have had to work much harder to get kind of the crumbs off the table. And I think that's what the systemic racism is.
I would definitely agree with that 100%. I know I could see the comments coming through, so I know there's people on the call that also can relate to that 100%. I would say, I would hope that as we move forward in the future, especially where we are now and with the pulse of, I can't even say the country, we got to say the world at this point, and where we are now, that we all see the opportunity for what it is and we actually utilize it the right way. Because I don't think that we're going to get another shot the way that maybe other points in history have. So I would say my hope is, moving forward a year from now, for example, reform, that something like that would take place at more of a rapid pace than what we've experienced to this point. And I say reform because it kind of starts there, and it's a trickle down effect. It's like a waterfall effect, and it affects so many other aspects of our life and has a greater reach. Like reading the news the other day and hearing that lynching was finally made a federal crime. 120 years for somebody to finally say that lynching is a federal crime, something that is kind of a common sense to us at this point. So this next question, I'm going to kind of look to you, Harold and Tim, for this one. Where would you hope to see our country 1 year from now?
That's a tough question. So 1 year from now, I would really love to see us go from just a conversation and hashtags, and I'm going to keep calling crumbs off the table, these donations that corporations are doing, to actually action in-house, right? So what does your board of directors look like? Do we have more Black CEOs of Fortune 500 companies? Do we have more Black VPs and directors? Do we have just more opportunity for Black vendors with some of these larger companies? I want to see a lot of the talk actually translate into action. And we do recognize that some of this takes time, right? CEOs aren't birthed overnight, but I would love to see a mentorship and a true pipeline so that we can start solving some of these systemic issues.
Yeah, I would agree with Harold on that. And I would like to just say, I would love to see media take responsibility how they portray Black people or people of color in America a lot as well. I think, so often our narrative is told by people of non-color, right? So they take the marginalized and they exploit the situations that go on in those communities all the time. But for instance, this group here, something that Tanya founded, is a great representation of us. Why aren't we exposing that more in media to let the world really see how we are as Black people as a collective? Okay, so I think what Harold is saying as well, you know, you want to see more CEOs and you want to see more people like you in those situations, but we're not giving those opportunities because a lot of times you're not actually depicting what Black people offer to this world. You understand? So I really feel like, I know in a year's time, like Harold said, it's going to be hard to do that. But I think if media, which is a big, big force, you know, showing the representation of Black people, all walks of life, would definitely help that cause. Unfortunately, with the events that happen, you know, with the George Floyd's and the Aubrey and the Breonna Taylors, you know, it is making a movement of an unfortunate situation, as well as so many other situations have been. But I think there's a equal power of when you actually show that Black people are just as great as doing this as a CEO, just as great as, not just as Sandra was saying, or I think it was Chantel was saying, you know, just an athlete or just a musician. I think in those fields of careers, I think because we see so much representation look like us, you see our young generation anxious to be a rapper, anxious to be this, anxious, and I think that's great. But they see like people like them, so it makes them feel confident. Situations like us, and I don't want to speak for all of us, but I can speak for myself in the technology field. When I first came into it after college, it was a scary space because there's not a lot of people that look like you. And nor did I have a lot of people telling me, oh, this is a great space for a Black person to excel in. So automatically you're finding your way. But as soon as you meet people like we're in our group now, it's like, oh, you feel a sense of breath of fresh air because you could be your authentic self, knowing you have the credentials, knowing you can do the work. But I don't think that's actually pushed in the narrative of our stories, that there's so many people like us and so many people not like us, but it's okay. So I think I would love to see that within a year, where the media actually takes responsibility to show our stories a lot differently than they have been over the years.
No, I agree, Tim. It's like, you know, it's too often where the old saying goes, what, don't judge the book by the cover, but we're always judged by our cover, right? Before we can say hello, we are judged by the exterior of what we look like and what they see when we come into the door, right? And that is not fair. It's not equitable. It's not sending home what America is built on, which is equality, right? So I agree with both you and Harold, and it would be ideal time to not just see companies throw, what did you use, Harold? The crumbs on the table, but put actions behind those words, right? I see all of these organizations giving out millions of dollars to different causes. And while that is great, but where do you stand? You know, be vocal, and where you stand, be vocal in creating the diversity and inclusion within your organizations. Take a hard look at your C-suite. What does it look like? Does it have people that look like us on it? If it doesn't, you need to reevaluate. You need to figure out who do you have on your interview teams so that we get exposure. And a lot of times the only way you go up the ladder is by having a mentor. So have you offered to mentor somebody that looks like me or looks like y'all? That's the questions that they really need to be asking themselves.
Yeah, and I was going to say mentorship and sponsorship, right? Because very often we have folks who will mentor someone and, oh, you know, that's the token. I take them out to lunch, I give them a little career advice, but are you really sponsoring that person? Are you advocating for them behind closed doors when decisions are being made that, hey, there's a strategic project coming up. Can we assign this to this person so that they can have the necessary skills so that when the opportunity presents itself, they're ready, right? Versus, oh, we mentor, but then behind closed doors, I don't really know if they're ready. You know, they don't really have the skills. I mean, it's a catch-22. I'm never going to get the skills to get the opportunity if you don't give me a chance to show what I can do. So that's something I'm just really passionate about.
I definitely agree with both of you, and even picking up on a point that you made, Tim, about entertainment. All of us, one thing that we all have in common, for those of you that don't know, is we love to travel, especially out of the country. We will be quick to book a vacation and go somewhere. And it's always interesting being in another country and having a conversation with someone and what their perception is, not just of Black people, but especially of people in the US. Especially when you have entertainment where we're always depicted as prostitutes, drug addicts, drug dealers, some sort of offender of some sort, or murderer. And then now traveling and going to certain places and having certain conversations with people, and the common thing that is always said, wow, you're so well spoken. I had no idea that there's people like you that have so much education, or wow, I would have never imagined that that's what you do in your career and every day. So it definitely plays a role, not just in this country, but outside of this country. Things like that have such a far-reaching, I would say, influence on people and how they view others of color and how they view certain groups and demographics. Yeah. Thank you guys for sharing your opinions and providing some feedback on that. I would say, speaking of the organizational level and kind of getting into that a little bit, the next question kind of actually falls in line with that. So that was a really good segue. And it looks more at what are things that we would like to see expanding upon that a little bit more in organizations and companies, especially in reference to this movement. One of the things that I think would help is for companies to really take a look at the wage comparisons and what those gaps are, not just in gender, but also in race, because we all know that they exist. And not just reviewing and taking a look at those gaps, but also taking the active steps to close those gaps, because we all know that it is an issue. It is a problem. It's an elephant in the room that nobody really talks about, but that is a move that really should take place. Eunice, what are your thoughts on that? Because you said that you have about 15 years of experience all in this exact realm.
Right, and in the accounting field. I would like to say, companies can start off with just having an increased awareness and taking action. So many companies have made changes in the past decades to have a more diverse and inclusive workforce. So that means we're bringing together people of varying backgrounds and upbringing that must interact for one common goal, the mission and the vision of the company. But however, people of color till this day still experience prejudices in the workplace. We know that due to learned behavior and biases, people will respond and act within their comfort zone. So at work, it's no different. These prejudices can come out in group dynamics, when it's time for a promotion, in management, in hiring practices. So at minimum, what I want to see companies do to ensure a healthy culture is having increased awareness about racial sensitivities, having zero tolerance for racism, and taking swift, appropriate action to remedy misalignment if it's an issue or if it comes up. Companies can ensure their policies, both explicit and implied, do not leave room for any inequality or unfair practices. And if information comes out that may suggest there may be something inappropriate or there's any impropriety happening, it should be investigated instead of being swept under the rug. So the easy answer, I think, for most people in these positions is they think someone else is going to deal with it, or it's not a big deal, or they make excuses for the offense. I want to see the default position across all organizations to be to address the claim or issues with a sense of urgency instead of just ignoring it and hoping it goes away. That's what I want to see. And that's something that companies today can start off with.
So would you also say, or would you agree with the thought that all companies at this point should definitely invest in having a diversity inclusion department? I know some do, but there's also a lot of them that don't.
Right, and that's what I mean. I think they should, right? So we have things like affirmative action that came out, decades ago, but there's more that we can do. So companies can take a hard look at themselves, see what's going on, and say, hey, are my policies in line? Am I making sure that I am covering, other people of color, in different races in my organization, and not just thinking that it doesn't exist, burying their heads in the sand. So I think something like having a diversity program is a solution, or a start to having the conversation, giving the forum so people can feel comfortable talking about their experiences and not minimizing it and saying, well, maybe you thought that happened, or I don't think that's what that person meant to say.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I would say it goes beyond just the in-house of companies covering their employees with diversity initiatives and inclusion efforts, but also thinking about the customers we serve, right? So I started my career on Wall Street doing banking software, and it was the old boys club. It was the old boys network, and there were lots of things said that were very inappropriate, especially about minorities, but specifically about women. And nothing was said. It was just kind of expected that people were to go along and get along. And I think many companies aren't willing to risk a customer who may be racist because they want those racist dollars. And I think we really have to take a stand as corporate citizens and do better.
Yep.
I would definitely agree with that 100%. I can't even begin to count how many times I've either been in the room and there have been certain jokes that even the person telling the joke knew that it was off-putting because they made it a point to directly beeline and say something to me like, hey, no disrespect, or don't get offended, or even just simple comments about your demeanor or how you act or how you speak or how you articulate yourself. Or I can't even tell you how many hiring managers I've dealt with that have said, you know, when I saw your name on a resume and it said Rachel Kaufman, I was so surprised when you came in because I just assumed you were white and Jewish. And then the fact that you're in that certain level of position to feel at any rate to be comfortable enough to say that to me and it be okay shows that, yeah, systemically there is an issue with that, 100%.
Yeah, I know Timothy Snelling gets that. I know Harold Booker gets that. Like people,
Right.
it's weird. It's like I don't know what they want my name to be. I didn't pick it. I wasn't around.
I have actually been on site and somebody said, Kelly, where did you get that name from? And I just remember staring at the person and I was just like, I don't know. I think my sleep probably. And it was very uncomfortable and it was one of those moments, but I think all of us who don't have maybe a traditionally, whatever they want our traditional Black name to be, have experienced something like that, where they're just surprised that we're not what they wanted it to be. So definitely.
Yeah, so I want to go back to something Harold was talking about with relative to our customers, right? So I think that is the sole reason why diversity inclusion programs are really important, because not only do you need that program to educate your internal employees and how to work together and how to collaborate, but in working in the space that all of us work in and working with external customers, it is even more important, right, on how your peers have to deal with and address the microaggressions, the systemic racisms that we're faced with from our outside external customers. And when you don't put those programs in place, you don't arm your employees with the tools that they need to be able to be successful out there in that space with external people that may not be getting as educated, right? They may not be as up in the know as to what they're doing or saying and the impact that that has on the consultants that are out there trying to deliver, in our case, software for them, right? And it happens every day. And it's not just racism, it's sexism, it's a whole, trend of different topics and things that happen that are not inclusive of everybody.
Yes, I would definitely agree with that 100%. And I'm actually curious, I've seen some of the audience comments coming through, but this is the point where I want to kind of ask everybody to actively get involved. I'm curious to hear some of the viewpoints of the audience and what are some things that you all feel that are active steps that organizations could start taking today to start addressing this and being more inclusive? As we have some of those comments coming in, we're moving into our last segment of the call. I like to call this one coming in hot. So this is the final question, and everybody's going to have a chance to answer. After we all have a chance to answer, weigh in, Tanya, you're going to take over. We're going to get to the audience and try to answer some of those questions, provide some of that feedback that you guys have been providing, and then we'll close this out. So, final question of the day. Everyone take a moment and think about what piece of advice you would give to the younger generation. So for me, my advice would be that education is key. I think in this country, we're definitely at a disservice because we haven't learned our history in its entirety. We've learned it in gaps and segments. For example, there's a lot of people that don't realize that Martin Luther King and Anne Frank were both born in 1929. They both existed for a period of time in the same period of time during the Second World War. So by separating cultural history, we never get to see the overall big picture. So I think it's important for all of us, including the younger generation, to understand that we're all responsible for being fearless storytellers in our homes and in the community, to pass on the knowledge, but all of the knowledge, and making sure that we're keeping that knowledge pure and factual. What do you all think? Anybody can take this.
I would say for the younger generation, I would say keep up the fight. You have to understand that although we want immediate change, like we all want immediate change for this stuff to come in effect, that it doesn't happen overnight. So don't get that anxiety when you're not actually seeing the change that you want, that you're promoting at this moment, because it does take time. But stay invested, don't get defeated, because I think it's a mental health check when you see everything going on and nothing actually immediately change. So it kind of gets you defeated and may want to give up hope. But I think for the younger generation, I just would impose, don't stop, keep pushing forward, and you'll see the change later on. Like we've seen the change somewhat things in the corporate world to what we want to see, but we still know we have to keep pushing for more change. So that's what I would impart to the younger generation.
Yeah, and I want to add to that. I would like for them to prepare for today so they can have the tomorrow they want, that they want. I've been fortunate enough to have great mentors, and Harold touched on that. It's almost impossible to go through life without having people that share their wisdom and their knowledge with you so that you can avoid some of the pitfalls that they've been through. And so having a great mentor just goes a long way. So I would tell that, the younger generation, or and people, or anyone who's just getting ready to even enter in the workforce, or being a person of color, just being prepared, always being ready, because you don't want to miss the opportunity because you weren't ready. So for example, when applying to college, you don't wait until your senior year to start looking for what college you want to go to and start trying to figure out the requirements. Your high school may expect you to complete, for example, 10 or 20 hours of community service, but the college you want to go to may require 120. So go above and beyond, set yourself apart so that when you apply, your admissions application stands out. At work, perform the duties for the position that you want, not the position that you're in. Demonstrate to others that you're ready for the role. So again, being ready for the opportunity that you want. Look at your circle of friends. Do they reflect the person you want to be? And are they a positive influence in your life? I mean, look and see, hey, where am I going? Where do I want to be? And try to surround yourself with people that can speak life into you and help lead you down the path that you want to go to. And lastly, I want to add, ask for advice, seek guidance, because again, you're not alone. The road that you're in have been walked by many before you, so they can definitely give you advice. Yes, you're the only one that can go through this path that you're on, but seeking guidance from other people just goes a long way. So just be ready for greatness and you will be great. That's what I would want to tell the next generation.
I would add to that, sorry. I was just going to say, I would add to that, it's very important that we go from being renters and borrowers to being owners and lenders. And what I mean by that is we're never going to be able to tell people how to spend their money and how to run their businesses. So we need to start putting ourselves in a position so that we are owners of the businesses and we are driving the policy. Because to one of the points that was mentioned earlier, like it has to start from the top down, any initiatives. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So how do we become owners? How do we run the businesses that we seek to change? How do we own those businesses?
Yes.
So I have two bits of advice to offer for this question. So the first one is similar to what Harold just said. For the younger generation, start a business early. The internet has provided unparalleled opportunity for you to be able to start and grow a business early on, so that when you reach your 20s and your 30s, you have a steady stream of income coming from that. So definitely leverage that opportunity. And then also for those who choose to take a traditional collegiate path, leverage that opportunity just in terms of networking and in terms of getting as many internship opportunities as possible. And that helps with that preparation that Eunice spoke to. College is not really about getting the degree or the major. It's about the networking, and it's about, again, the experience that you get. And you want to make sure that from a preparation standpoint, that when you do graduate, that you have those tools already in place to allow you to get the opportunity to succeed.
Absolutely.
And I do want to add to that. I think for the younger generation, I think just to understand your powers, your strengths, use your resources. So social media for them right now is just an amazing platform, and the ability to connect and use that you can see how easy they can tear things down and build things up with social media. For us, social media was a little bit different. It was more of a networking tool. Say, hey, I'm here, or this job is here, and those different type of tools. But for the younger generation, I think just using that platform, using social media, using your strengths, you understanding what's going on today, communicating with everyone out there, what businesses you can, what Black businesses you can invest in, and things like that. For us, we didn't get that access. We didn't know Black businesses. They're not in yellow pages or anything like that. But for them, they're able to just send out a post of a list of Black businesses nearby. So having that ability for that resource, use it to your extent. And then when it comes to professionally, just understanding who you are and what you're able to bring to a company, and a lot of what Eunice said as well.
Yeah, and I just want to add, because this is a topic that obviously I'm very passionate about, reaching out to the youth. So telling them to get engaged and get involved in their community. I mean, making change at the local level, at the county level, goes a long way. Your vote does count. It matters. You have a voice. Don't listen to what other people say. You can make a difference, and we make a difference in numbers. And so just being socially active, being involved, staying connected, knowing that there's other grassroots forces at play that are, out there to help movement. So just kind of plugging in, saying, get involved.
Yeah, you all very articulated it very well, right? And offered some of the same advice I would offer. I would just reiterate that to the younger generation, that your mindset is your greatest asset, right? Keep your mind focused. Demand that we have not only equality in our jobs, for our pay, for our participation, but most importantly, equality of respect, right? We are humans, and we should demand that we be treated as such on all fronts, in the business world, in the public eye. That is what's most important. So before we close out, I just want to see if there are any additional questions from our viewers or comments. You guys have been actively participating, and we greatly appreciate it. Let's see. Rachel Tyler says, younger generations ask questions. Let me see. Break the head down, yes ma'am, yes sir mentality. Challenge the status quo, and even ask or have the uncomfortable conversations. Obtain as much knowledge and truth as possible, so when you have the platform or opportunity, you have the proper information and resources to justify your stance. Own your narrative. Show up for yourself and give it all that you have. Read, research, stick together. We are always stronger together. Absolutely, Rachel, you nailed that, right? We are stronger together. That is the, I think the message that we want to make sure our youth understand, in us being stronger together. Let's see, there are some other comments coming in, but we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna wrap it up here. We really appreciate you guys joining us, but before we leave, I just want to leave you guys with a few thoughts. I wish I could say racism and prejudice were only distant memories, but as I look around, I see that even educated whites and African Americans have lost hope in equality. That's something Thurgood Marshall said in 1992. And today it's June 19, 2020, a day of celebration in which we celebrate our emancipation from slavery, and yet living Black in America still equates to feeling like being enslaved. So the question is, what do we do? It's not an easy fix, y'all. We are confronting deep-seated, complex, and highly personal attitudes. But opening the dialogue like we have done today is the good first step. Not too long ago, there was a code of silence where, as a Black professional, you were taught to shut up and be quiet. But the time has come for us to speak. The time has come for us not only to claim our seat at the table, but use our seat to invoke change. The time has come for us to be seen and to be heard. We have to be willing to ask the uncomfortable questions and be prepared to deal with some very difficult answers. We have to be ready to stand together because, as Rachel Tyler said a few minutes ago, together we are strong, but divided we will not only fall, but we will fail. So you have heard us speak of what it means to be living Black in America, the perspective of the Black professional. We have shared our stories. We have recounted the horrible memories, but we have been live and we have been real. So we invite you to join us July 2nd at 7 p.m. as we will have Erica Simpson, real estate mogul and broker of Erica Homes, LLC, as well as owner business coach of Bossed Up Academy to talk about buying back our blocks, the power of real estate. But before we go, I'll leave you with this last thought. And in his autobiography of an ex-colored man, James Weldon Johnson wrote, "It's no disgrace to be Black, but it is often very inconvenient." Till next time, this has been YBC Revolt Talk.